All right, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm Robert Rogers, your neighborhood realtor, and definitely want to make sure that you hit that subscribe button and subscribe to us on YouTube. That's where you'll get all of these updates from every webinar that we do every single month. Each month we do a different topic. A lot of them are really exciting. They're all really informative, and you will not want to miss them when we update new ones. So tonight, we're going to cover everything that you need to know to sell your house and buy another one at the same time so that you don't end up homeless. This is literally the number one question that we've all been getting asked lately. And, the reason for that is because there is so many different, let me turn on my do not disturb. There's so many different variables to this, and our market is so competitive right now that we need to cover a lot of those different things. So let's talk about, these are some of the things we're going to go through, a brief overview of the challenges. I'm not going to hit every single one of these because I am going to go through them as we talk about them. But, for instance, the importance of strategic planning, analyzing the current real estate trends, understanding your local market, identifying the timing, your financial situation, financing options. Then we'll go through all the things that you need to do traditionally just to prepare your home for sale, setting the right price, navigating offers and managing the process, defining your needs, conducting a home search, and then understanding legal documents, contingencies. And then, as always, at the very end, I'll open it up to questions. So that's kind of the format that we're going to go through tonight. And now we'll kind of get started. So let's start with the overview of the challenges of simultaneously selling and buying homes. This is quite complex because in today's market, in the old days, many times you would just go out there and find a new house that you wanted to buy, and then you would get it under contract with a contingency in there that, hey, we've got to sell our old house. And then you would do that, and the seller would accept that offer with that contingency, and they might even give you 6 months to get your house sold. And that's just not the reality of the market that we're in now. Homes are selling very fast and with very aggressive offers. So sellers don't want to wait on somebody to sell their house. So let's talk about the importance of strategic planning and preparation. Obviously, the number one thing is we want to make sure that you get into the home that you want, and secondly, that you don't end up homeless in the process. And that's where the strategic planning with the right realtor is really, really important. We're going to go through all of those different things. We're going to lay out all of your options, and we're going to figure out what works best for your financial situation. Sometimes it may be that you have to go ahead and sell your house and rent temporarily, stay with family, something like that. But we're going to analyze every single option out there. So then that way you can decide what is absolutely best for your family. And then that way we can prepare for that and all the variables that'll come up in the process. Again, that the most important piece is just that we don't put you in a situation where, ideally you're comfortable living in the home that you're in right now, but obviously you do want something else, or you need to relocate to somewhere else. Maybe you need to be in a different school district. We don't want to put you out of that home that you're in currently. So let's talk about the current real estate trends. You have a seller's market and you have a buyer's market. And, if this was interactive, I could tell you that we could take votes and see who would vote for which type of market we're in now. I'll just go ahead and give you the answer. We're in a seller's market. Back in 2017, for instance, we were very much in a buyer's market. You could come in, you could beat a seller up, you could get closing costs, you could get all your repairs done, and a lot of different things like that. We are not in that sort of market today. We're very much in a seller's market, which means that the sellers get to call most of the shots. Understanding local real estate market. Let's kind of go through what our local market looks like. So because you might be listening to the news and you're hearing like what's happening in California or what's happening on a very big macro level. So we want to break it down to here and what's happening here in Hampton Roads. And even more specifically, we might need to break that down further depending upon where you're selling and where you're buying. For instance, if you were trying to sell a house in Portsmouth or Suffolk and then move to Virginia Beach, that could pose an additional layer of complexity in that situation, just because of the fact that homes in Portsmouth and Suffolk are going to sell a little bit slower, and people are not making as aggressive as offers as they are in Virginia Beach. We're still seeing a ton of appraisal guarantees and sometimes even waived home inspections and things like that in Virginia Beach that we're not seeing in other areas. So let's break it down even a little further. So right now, we're seeing a trend here of the median sales price for single family homes over the past 12 months is just under $400,000. As you can see from this map here, that's the way it's been trending for the past 12 months. Last March, it was probably around 370-ish. It's probably around 385 right now. So at one point it bumped 400 and it came back down. So prices are still, they're holding very steady and even somewhat on the rise. Now let's look at our days on market. This is extremely important. If you look at March of last year, we were just under 15 days on market. I believe it was 14 to be exact. In January of this year, we hit the highest days on market, which was about 29 days on market. So we haven't even crossed 30 days. To be in a buyer's market, you would need to cross 180 days on market, just to give you some comparison there. Now we've come back down and we're right now about 15, 16 days on market. So just keep that in mind. If you're wanting to sell your house, it's great news for you. It's going to sell extremely fast. The challenge is, what are we going to do now? Because your house is under contract and you want to move somewhere else. And in a market where houses are selling, in an average of 2 weeks, why would a seller consider your contingent offer when they have a cash offer or a financed offer, but with, very short due diligence period, inspection period, et cetera? Why are they going to take your finance or your contingent offer? So again, those are some things we're going to talk about as we go through this PowerPoint this evening. Identifying the right timing for selling and buying. Are you moving locally or are you moving across the country? These are big things that matter. If you're moving to California for work, we've got to do it right now, or when you've got to be there. If you are, but if you're are you trying to time the school zones? There's a whole different, many different layers of complexity in here. And that's something we all need to sit down and we need to discuss to determine what the right timing is for you, your family, and your unique situation. It could be the kind of thing as well where you might choose to not do this in spring, even though traditionally that's when everybody likes to do it. All times of the year are good to sell. However, what I tell people is there are typically spring brings out the most buyers, so it can just make it a little bit more challenging. Let's talk about evaluating your current financial situation. This is something we're really going to need to dive into. We're going to need to know, what can you afford? Can you afford to have 2 mortgages at the same time? Do you have to sell your house in order to get the down payment to buy the new house? If so, we've got to sell this one and you've got to have that money freed up to close on the new house. So there is a whole lot of different variables in here that we've got to discuss. Will you qualify to carry 2 loans at the same time? That obviously is the easiest thing to do. It is, somewhat the most nerve-wracking because you are going to have 2 mortgages. But the absolute easiest thing to do is you go pick out the new house that you want to buy. You go ahead, we put it under contract. You close on it. You move out of your old house. We spruce it up, do any painting, anything that we need to do. We put it on the market. It sells in, 2 weeks and you're off to the races. That just financially doesn't always work for everybody. And that's where we have to figure out, what will your financial situation allow? The other thing that we have to look at is many people are locked into an interest rate around 3.5% right now. That's about 22%, I think, of all homes in North America that have a loan on them right now. So roughly 1 in 5 homes. Well, when you go to buy, you're going to be looking at paying around 6.5%. So that's almost double in your interest rate. So we have to kind of factor that into everything and make sure that you've kind of talked this through with a lender, you've talked it through with your family, and make sure that you're comfortable, because you are definitely going to have some payment shock in there. It's kind of like when you go out and you buy a new car after you haven't had, it's not as challenging if you've had a car payment, but if your car was paid for and then you go to get a new one, it can sometimes, like, that payment can be really shocking, especially if the last time you bought a car was like 2015, because they've gone up in price so much. So those are just some different factors that we'll really need to think about, just again, to make sure that we're taking care of you and that you're set up correctly to do this. Again, this goes right into budget. We've got to set a realistic budget for selling and buying. How much, if you are going to, buy the new house, then sell the old one, how much money do you have to make all that work? Do you have the down payment? Do you have money to pay to spruce up your old house and then stage it after you move out? Do you have the money in the bank in reserve to carry both mortgages for a few months? There's always different variables in there that are unique to your budget that will, need to analyze to see what's going to work for your situation. Let's talk about some of the financing options, including bridge loans and contingencies. When you're, one of the things that a lot of people have heard about over time, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, is bridge loans. And what that means is let's say that you own a $500,000 house, just to make our math really simple, and you want to go buy $1 million house. Well, let's say that you have $200,000 equity in your old house. And that's what you need as the down payment, 20% for your new house. So what you would do is they would pull that $200,000 equity out of your old house and then use it as your down payment to buy the new house. That way you go ahead and have a permanent loan on the new house. Then when you sold your old house, you just wouldn't get any money because they would pay everything off. That is probably one of the most expensive options out there. I've seen those cost, upwards of 5 to 8% to do those, in terms of like the financing cost and everything else, with upfront free fees, etc. So again, those are all just factors to take into account, because you may not want to spend a large portion of your equity to do that, or you might have to. So again, those are just, different things to look at. There are some other programs out there. There's a cash for keys product. Again, somewhat expensive. However, it does work, where you can go in and you can go ahead and the lender will make a cash offer on the new house. You buy it, you basically rent the house from them, and then you sell your old house, and then you go to closing on the new house. So you do have double closing costs, but it can work. It's a very valid option. And then there's a lot of different contingencies, which I'll go into later, that we can talk about, other than just a traditional home sale contingency. Let's talk about preparing your home for sale, staging, repairs, and upgrades. These are all really, really important. Obviously, especially if you're going to be doing this, you want to make sure you get absolute top dollar for your current house, which means if you've moved out of it, you're going to need to stage it. You're going to need to make any necessary repairs, as well as any necessary upgrades, so that your house is in optimal, tip-top condition. That's what's going to help you get that absolute top price for that house. That's another place that we're going to guide you on where you should spend that money. Next thing that we're going to need to do is set the right price and marketing strategy. Again, we're going to, try to get the timing right on everything. Make sure that your house is priced correctly, ideally, so you get in a situation where you have a bidding war. Because if you have a bidding war for your house, even though that sucks when you're the buyer buying the new house, it is going to allow us some flexibility in some of our negotiations. Maybe that buyer will give you a 2 or 3 month rent back, and let you stay there so that now you already have your money and you can go out there as a non-contingent buyer to buy the new house. These are going to all go into your pricing and marketing strategy, which we'll sit down and craft together. Then we're going to have to navigate offers and negotiations. This is another thing as your realtor that we're going to walk you through. Let's say you get 5 offers. We're going to need to help you with that. And then on the other side, when you're going to buy, there's going to be a lot of negotiations there in terms of navigating the complexity of this situation with your other house. So we're going to have to work through all of those almost individually on a case-by-case basis. This is kind of an overview just to give you an idea of some of the options that are out there, but we're really going to have to craft a unique plan based on your unique circumstances. Let's talk about managing the closing process effectively. Again, this is where it's super important that you have a realtor that's really good at the details, because every day, every detail, every part of this whole process is really going to matter, because anything that pops up could throw a wrench into everything and delay the process, which then could springboard and create a domino effect onto the house that you're trying to purchase. Or if you've already purchased, it could create a reverse domino effect that affects the ultimate price that you get for the house you're trying to sell. Let's talk about defining your needs and preferences for your next home. When you've bought before, you've been through this before. We're going to sit down, we're going to do a needs analysis. We're going to talk about what's really important for you and why you want to move. Maybe it's school zones, maybe it's you need a bigger house, maybe it's your job is relocating you across the country. Maybe the military is moving you somewhere. Any of those things, it's a whole host of things. We're going to sit down and figure that out, and then figure out what is really, really important to you in your new home to make sure that we get those things that are ultimately the reason that you're moving. Because you don't want to go through this process and then find out all I did was move to basically the same house I have in a different part of town, unless that's ultimately what you want to accomplish. If that is what you want to accomplish, then great. But if it's not, we want to make sure that we help you accomplish exactly what it is that you want to accomplish. Then, we're going to conduct a home search. You're probably going to be out there looking on all the sites. We're going to send you the most up-to-date list through our, multiple listing service, but there is all the internet portals, there's open houses, and then there's us, your realtor. We should be actually out there finding you stuff as well. And, ideally maybe networking and finding you some potential things that aren't on the market. Many times when I've dealt with contingent sellers before, I've gotten lucky, and I have found, just from networking with other realtors, I found somebody who was in a unique situation as well that didn't want to put their home on the market because they didn't want to end up homeless. And it might create a double domino where they're like contingent on something, whatever, but where we've been able to make that work and navigate kind of that process. Because if you know that you have the house that you're going into, it makes it much more comfortable to put your house on the market and go ahead and sell it with a rent back. Obviously you may be out there going to open houses, and you may find something you like that way. It's somewhat unlikely, but it does give you an idea of what's on the market. Obviously, the best thing that you're going to get is when we give you a private tour of a home. Then, once you find that home that you like, we're going to make an offer and we're going to negotiate that purchase agreement. This is where, crafting the right offer is going to be really important to make sure that you win, especially if you're competing in a multiple offer situation. Every detail is important. Making sure that we didn't ask for anything that they didn't say they were including. Make sure that we give them the ideal closing date for them. Maybe, they're moving across the country and the Navy's packing them up on June 10th and they don't want a closing before June 11th. Then we want to give them a closing on June 11th. We want to make sure that, we've really crafted our offer well. Maybe we have to do the home inspection for informational purposes only. Doesn't mean we have to waive it, but maybe we have to agree to tell them that we're not going to ask for any repairs, and that's how we beat out another offer. These are all different things. Maybe we have to offer some sort of appraisal gap coverage. So a lot of different things that we can do to make sure that we win that offer. And then understanding contingencies in the inspection process. So there's multiple layers of contingencies here. The first one is, obviously, it's going to be contingent on the home inspection. So we've got to get through the home inspection. You have to be satisfied that you still want to buy this house. Doesn't mean we can't reopen negotiations, but you need to be happy with the house. Then there's the additional contingency of, if you are contingent, if it is contingent upon you selling your home or contingent on financing or anything else, we need to put all that in there. Another thing that I'd like to mention as well, it is very possible, and this is where a good realtor, pays dividends. I can't tell you the number of times over, 20 years that I've been doing this. I actually just did this last summer for somebody where they didn't have to sell. They wanted to sell. So these clients, they wanted to buy a new house and they did not have to sell their current house to buy the new one. So we made a non-contingent offer on the house that they wanted to buy. We got lucky based on the date that the Navy was packing that family up, and we were able to get a little extra long closing. Now, like I said, they really wanted to sell their old house prior to closing on the new one. What we were able to do is we went ahead and busted it and got their house on the market within a week. They were actually under contract and were able to close just a few days after they ended up closing on the new house. So it worked really well for them because they had that financial assurance that all the contingencies have been removed from the house that we're selling, and we know we're closing on the new one. So again, these are all just a multitude of factors that we can use in this situation. Let's talk about some strategies. We've already talked about a few of them for simultaneous transactions, but coordinating and selling and buying timelines. This is where it's just super important that everybody's on the same page. We know what day you're closing on this one, what day you're closing on the new one. Let's assume in the state of Virginia, each state's a little bit different. We do some transactions in North Carolina, which is a little bit different. So in the state of Virginia, when you go to closing, the house is yours. If you're the buyer, when you sign at closing, the house is now yours. However, you're not going to get your money until the seller is not going to get their money. Let me backtrack for a second. So you're selling the house and then you're going to buy one. So when you sell your house today, when you go to closing and sign, it hasn't actually transferred until when the buyer signs the day after when they record. That's not to say that they can't record the same day, but unless the buyer signs at like 9 or 10 a.m., more than likely they're not going to get the deed recorded at the courthouse today. Even though all that's done electronically, it just takes some time. They have a post-closing department. That's not the only closing they're having today. So typically it's the next business day. Why this is really important is, let's say that you're trying to close on your new house before the weekend. Then you would need to sell your old house ideally on Tuesday or Wednesday so that it records and disperses on Wednesday or Thursday. And that means that you have the money to close on your new house on Thursday or Friday. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, if you were in the state of North Carolina, they don't actually consider the new person the owner until the deed has actually recorded. Doesn't really matter. The flip side of that, though, is that in the state of Virginia, if you were to sign at 3 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, you are now the new owner of that house, even though the deed will not get recorded until Monday, so you can move in this weekend. Now, flip back to the state of North Carolina. If you signed at 3 p.m. on a Friday, you're not moving in until Monday afternoon when that deed records. So these are some nuances that are really, really important. And it's really important that you're working with a realtor who understands all of these and can properly guide you, because one little domino out of line can cause a lot of problems. Contingency planning and backup options. You're going to need them. I mean, at the end of the day, stuff is going to happen. We all know Murphy's Law. And so we're going to need to have, what is the backup plan? What happens if the first deal falls through? What happens if there is a title defect or some sort of something outside of our control? One time I had some clients closing on a house and the appraiser's mother died. Obviously, you know, like, terrible situation. You want to be sympathetic to that. The appraiser, they gave the appraiser an additional 2 weeks to complete that appraisal. Well, that caused my client to be delayed. I mean, I don't think the appraiser took the full 2 weeks, but she took about a week and a half. And what the mortgage company said was, by the time we can get a new appraiser assigned to this file, we can just wait on the current one to upload the appraisal. They had already done the site inspection and everything, but this kind of stuff just happens. Like I tell everybody, you know, like Murphy's going to strike. So we do need to have a backup plan. Do you have family you can stay with? Do you have friends you can stay with? Do you have, if something happens and you can't get that down payment money, do you have a place that you can borrow it from temporarily until your house sells if that gets delayed? We need to talk about all these, because the less contingency planning that you have, the more this is going to make this entire situation stressful. And it's already stressful enough, so we don't want to add any extra stress. All right, we talked about bridge loans a little bit before, so let's talk about rent back agreements as well. So a bridge loan, again, is where you basically borrow the equity in your house currently so that you can go ahead and buy the new house. It's pretty straightforward. They are higher interest rate, so that is something to keep in mind. And some of them do require a refinance later. There's several different kinds of bridge loans. So that is something that, you know, we would need to discuss all of those options with the loan officer that you're going to work with. Or we might need to talk to several different loan officers and see who has the best bridge loan product out there. Rent back agreements, they're actually pretty straightforward. So you sold your house today, and the new buyer is agreeing to let you rent that house back for a set period of time. Now, if they are getting a mortgage, technically they can only rent you that house back for 60 days because they need to take possession within 60 days. Because they're getting an owner-occupied mortgage. Just keep that in mind. When you close on a house, if you were to give a rent back to somebody, you would need to, you sign loan documents today, if you're closing today, that says that that's going to be your primary residence. What that means is that you intend, the word intention is really important. You intend to take possession of that property within 60 days. That's not to say that something couldn't happen. Like, let's say the military's moving you here, you go ahead and close and they delay you for another month and it's 92 days before you move in. That's not mortgage fraud. You had every intention of moving into that property. However, if you were to sign a year rent back with somebody and then you're not, you know, you give that seller of that house a year to move out, you're going to need to be paying cash for that house or buying it with an investor loan product, because you're not intending to take possession of that property and make it your primary residence within 60 days. Hopefully that part makes sense. Intention there is really, really important. If you already have a rent back in place for beyond 60 days, then there is no intention that you're going to move into that property within 60 days. So that's kind of how a rent back works. Like, they would be responsible for everything, you know, utilities, everything, just as if they were renting the property. So again, this is a strategy that we use a lot, because typically if 60 days is really a lot of time, especially considering you're going to go shopping the day that you go under contract, essentially. And the longer you've been under contract, once you're through home inspection, once you're through appraisal, it just makes your contract more solid for us to go negotiate with somebody else. It's still possible we'll get beat out, but there's a way better chance that we can get a contingent offer accepted if you're already through home inspection and appraisal on the house that you're selling, and we can make a really solid case that you have a really solid offer there. So again, that's how that rent back piece works. So it really could give you upwards of 75 days to get something done. So it is a good bit of time. Obviously, communication is everything. You want a realtor, transaction coordinator, loan officer, title rep, and the agent on the other side to all be working together to help navigate this process so that's really smooth. Because as you can see, if there's one party out of the mix that's not in the loop, that could really wreak havoc on this whole situation and make it even more stressful. Then we're going to need to review all the legal documents, the purchase contracts, the disclosures, rent back agreements, home inspection amendment, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of legal paperwork in here as well. And you're going to need somebody that can really help you navigate that, explain and articulate everything to you, and just make sure that you're really comfortable with what you're signing. Because sometimes, it's not very often when somebody's selling their house that they don't understand this. But, every once in a while, I hear horror stories of people thinking, well, I don't have to sell my house. Well, actually, you do. Once you have gone under contract and you have, told a buyer you have an executed purchase agreement with the buyer, then, you actually have to sell that house to them. Now, can they come in there with guns blazing and force you to move out? No. Can they take you to the closing table and force you to sign the documents? No. However, a massive legal battle could ensue, and no one wants to do that. It is just it's too stressful, it's too costly, and it's too time consuming. So we do want to make sure that you understand everything that you're signing, and do understand and have some contingency plans and backup plans, et cetera, in case something was to go wrong, one domino gets out of place or something like that. Let's talk about your legal obligations. I kind of just went through that. Like, when do you have to move out? Well, that's going to be in the purchase contract that you sign with the buyer that's buying your house. And again, these are all things that we can negotiate. Typically, you're going to move out the day before closing or before the buyer signs so that they can do a walkthrough on an empty house. If we do have a seller's possession agreement in place, though, then you could stay in that house for up to 60 days, longer if the buyer is buying in cash. So again, these are just things to consider. I mean, it might be worth it to you if you get a cash offer that's a little bit less than the financed offer. And they're like, hey, we'll let you rent back as long as possible. We just want to know that we are ultimately one day moving into this house. Those are, that could be why somebody takes a cash offer that's a little less over a financed offer. So just a lot of different factors in here to consider. And then obviously we're going to want to help manage your stress and emotional challenges through this process. It is going to be stressful. It's going to be emotional. There's no other way around it. So, my goal is with all of my clients is to communicate where everything that's going on every step of the way, and that hopefully makes it a little less stressful and a little less emotional. But we're here even for just moral support and to just re-walk you through everything. We know that it's a stressful process, and we do it every day. And it still is a lot of moving parts for us, so we get that it's even more for you. Handling unexpected delays and contingencies. We kind of talked about this earlier. It's gonna happen. You're gonna want to pull the clock back basically, or push it forward maybe. And that's where those contingency plans are really, really important, so that you don't end up, the day before closing being like, we're going to be homeless. We do not want that to happen. And we want to try as hard as possible. We can't predict everything, but that's why having some sort of contingency plan or backup plan in place is a really good idea, and it will help lower your stress. Even if it's not a plan that you want to do, like maybe it's we're going to go stay with family or something, we're going to put our stuff in storage. It's just a good idea to have that worst case scenario plan so that you don't wind up at the 9th hour being like, we got no place to go. Now, this is really, really important. Sometimes people don't understand this, but it's super important that you use the same realtor throughout the process. Hopefully that has been kind of, apparent today as I've gone through everything tonight, is how important it is to use the same realtor throughout the entire process. Now, obviously, if you're moving to California, Washington State, Hawaii, something like that, then it's going to be really important that I communicate with, or a member of my team is communicating with your realtor there, so that we're all on the same page. It just adds a layer of complexity, but that's okay. We do it every day. However, if you're using a different realtor, let's say you're selling a house in Norfolk and then you're buying a house in Virginia Beach, you need to, if you're using different realtors, you need to introduce them and pray that they become best friends, because they're going to have a lot of details that they need to communicate about. And if they don't, it is going to make the whole process for you a nightmare. So I always encourage you to either use the same realtor or use two realtors that are on the same team. Maybe one knows, specifically knows a neighborhood better than another one. That could, make sense. But again, you're going to want to make sure that they have ironclad communication, because it's going to make your life so much easier. So we have covered a ton this evening. So I want to make sure I open the floor up for questions. If anybody has any questions, you can drop them in the chat. Be happy to answer them. And from there, we'll have next month, we'll have another webinar. It'll be the third Monday of May at 7 p.m., same time. And I think that one may be on investment property. I meant to look at the list right before we started tonight, but we have a ton of really cool topics coming up, including, investment property, how to do a 1031 exchange, how to house hack, just a multitude of different things that can be really useful, especially in today's market, and just answer a lot of questions that there isn't concise information out there on the internet about. As always, if you want, scan this QR code, schedule a virtual coffee with me. I'm always happy to sit down and, we could just jump on a Zoom together and just kind of talk through some things. If you need me to come out to your house, always happy to do that as well. But sometimes most people just want to start with a virtual coffee and just chat for 15 or 20 minutes and get an idea if this is something that's even going to work for their situation. I do really appreciate everybody spending, almost an hour with me here on their Monday night. And as always, I'm here to answer any questions that you have. And thanks for coming.